A lot of questions are, does my flute need tuning? Is it out of tune? I often get that, right? A lot of people often talk about tuning and wonder if that's an issue. Oh look, I have new bags here.
Oh.
Kind of a mess. Wasn't sure I was going to make it to the festival, and I kind of packed off the last minute. So let's see what we're going to do today. Okay, it's 1:34. Hey, how you doing?
Hey. I'm good. I haven't got anything to repair. I just thought I'd come along.
Yes, all right, all right. Let's see. Actually, just give me a minute to organize this so that I know how to talk about how to do this lecture today. Okay, let's see. It's 1:30. I want to go to Ralph Samuelson's workshop at 5. No, what time is it? At 3:15. We'll probably wrap it up. It's not like a real demo. Like I don't have much to show, but I can. It depends on where our conversation goes.
The last workshop I think is 3 to 4.
3 to 4 with Ralph. I think it's 3:15 or something like that.
Because the afternoon ones are 1 hour.
Oh yeah, they changed
because
the
of the
schedule
concert.
earlier.
Oh, they changed it. So is that what time?
It's up from 3 to 4.
Like
3. Okay, so I have basically an hour. I mean, I think that this lecture will go about an hour, or talk, or discussion, or Q&A, or more, but not more than. We'll end at 2:45. So a lot of familiar faces. Thank you for coming back to all my workshops. These 4 workshops this week. There's a couple of new faces I don't know. Seamus, Denise, Paul, Jefferson, Barry, Steve, Tom, Lydia, Charlie, Cindy, and I remember
Francis.
Francis
Yeah, I haven't
and
probably said hi.
Alyssa. Alyssa.
Like Melissa without the N.
Alyssa, great. Thank you all for coming back. Those of you who came back. Apparently, I just found out I lead the most workshops out of this whole festival.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so tired.
Where
And-
you get the big bucks.
and I get the big bucks, and I don't get to participate. You know, like that's why I want to end and make sure I get the universal flute, which I think you should all, if you can get to, do Ralph Samuelson's universal flute workshop. So I want to say again, with all respect to all the incredible masters that are here and their generosity, and I come with their spirit, and even this morning in doing the Robuki with them, and I saw some of my teachers there, and they're honoring Yokoyama Katsuya and his lineage, and he was the first one that started this festival, in Bisei, in the I forgot the date, in the early 90s.
94, I think.
94, and we're here because of that. And I saw myself early in my journey in 2000 with my shakuhachi making teacher when he was sitting with the long flutes. I don't know if you all saw that today. And all those long flutes were made by, oh God, I couldn't remember his name. Kurita. He's 85 years old. He made all those long flutes, And all those guys that were playing with them have known each other for 40 or 50 years. Sitting in that circle. So I was gonna go to Aki Reibo's workshop, but I'm sitting in this circle with everybody left because there's secrets in there, And they're just talking and sharing, and I'm like, you know what? This is what it's all about, right? So talking and sharing. People used to say, oh, there's Shakuhachi secrets, and the teachers keep those secrets, And I used to think that, but after a while, I don't think they're keeping the secrets. I think that the students don't know how to listen. right? They're playing all those secrets right in front of you. You just have to listen and grab those secrets. And then I realized at some point, that's the Japanese way of teaching. Students don't ask questions. Students should just watch and learn and grab. And at some point, after 10 years, they can ask a question, right? So that's the Japanese way. Hello. Yeah, feel free to come in if you want, or squeeze in. What's your names?
Wait,
Wei?
I'm Nathan.
Nathan?
Grace.
Grace? Yeah, welcome. Yeah, just gonna reiterate quickly that it's all in a, what I'm sharing is all something I've gathered in 30 years of my own work with people, musicians who need tuning. And it made me really question and understand and investigate what tuning means for all these different people who need tuning on their flutes. And so feel free to, take notes, record, take pictures, and share, or use whatever you want, because I don't care about secrets. It's all about what I'm sharing. So generally speaking, a lot of my work is repair these days. And a big part of the questions I ask is, I think my shakuhachi is out of tune. I think it's in the old tuning. And so I have to ask what that means to that person, because everybody has a different idea of what tuning is and what they're using the music for. What are they using the flute for? So I have to start, in the beginning I went, oh, it has to go from old flute, out of tune in our Western ears, to A440 today. And so we'll have to make a leap from an instrument made 100, 200 years ago to fit to what a player needs today. That's a legitimate need for a musician. After a while, I'm looking at these old flutes and I'm playing them, and there's a certain tonal quality. And I started to well, do I need to change that? Because when I change the tuning, it changes the quality, the feeling of the instrument. And after a couple of years of doing that, I started to feel like I need to really understand what tuning means, and because before I start messing up flutes, right? Because these are artifacts. These are artifacts to the past. These are the only things that will tell us how a person lived and played back then. You've all heard of the telephone game? Somebody plays it like this, somebody's tuning was like this, somebody fingers it like this, somebody blows like this. By the time you get 3 people into it, it's totally different already. But if you have a flute, you have the original source. And this is the thing that you should have a relationship with, and question things with, and learn with. So, having said that, what do you all think about tuning with your instruments? The first thing you do when you pick up your flute, what are you doing with it? And just raise your hand and tell me, what are you doing with your flute? Seamus.
First thing I do, and Araki taught me this, so I blow hot breath into back 5-hole and the front and the bottom. And it gets everything nice and lubricated and warmed up for when I start playing, and it just seems to raise that micro pitch just enough.
Okay.
That works for me.
Yeah, so you blow into an instrument and you want to make it sharper. Yeah. What do you do with it after that?
Then I, of course, clean it and then let it sit. I just let it sit for a little while to reacclimate, and then I'll bag it up or whatever.
Oh, do you play a kind of music, or do you meditate?
Yeah, I'll meditate with it usually, and I'll put it back, because I'll play it multiple times during the day.
Right, so you don't play like a song.
Yeah, I'll do that too. I'll do
Okay.
both. So sometimes
Yeah.
during the day, but I always do that as my ritual.
Right, and when you play a song, do you have a tune in your ear, a pitch, something written?
Usually
Yeah.
I'm looking at sheet music or something.
Yeah, and when you're playing that, is it old music or new music?
It's usually older.
Yeah,
So if I'm trying to learn either a piece of honkaku or something, then I have to remember that, because sometimes the pitch is going to be slightly different.
yeah. Do you have a reference? Are you playing to a recording?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am playing, because I know that's the Japanese way of doing it. So sometimes I've listened to Katsuya or somebody else play, or even current recordings, but with older instruments. And so you're going to always have just that slight bit off, and then of course there's the mixing and everything too.
Okay, so you're kind of adjusting to different recordings that you hear with your flute.
And my ears too.
Okay. So Western A440 is not on your mind when you're playing the
No,
instrument?
it's
Right.
not. We used
Right.
to use that in all my other instruments, but not for this.
Right, right. Okay, yeah. Anybody else?
I was gonna say, I'm the opposite, because I'm coming from a clarinet and orchestra background, so like the A440.
Right.
I had no idea about any of this or how, the age, well, I mean, mine's a brand new wood, but anyway, I would just get my tuner out and be like, this row is supposed to be like, this note, I'm gonna play it, I'm a beginner, oh, maybe I'm sharp, flat, whatever, and I don't even know the proper embouchure, so I'm just kind of moving things around like, oh, I hit the note,
Right.
I guess that's fine, and then
Right.
I learned from videos online by Marco Leonard,
Yeah.
who's like a no,
Yeah.
so I'm a taiko player as well, so
Oh,
I know the
okay.
community, and I would hear him play and be like, oh, he sounds like that, until like you were saying you're adjusting to recordings, I'm like, okay, it can sound like that, and that's all I know right now.
Right, right. But
And then just in addition to adjusting to people at Robuki.
right. So your first intention is to make sure it plays with a fixed pitch in other instruments at A440.
Oh, because I would think like my intention is to play music, because I'm coming from a music background.
Right, right.
So I'm thinking like, oh, I want to play a song, so it's got to be in tune, because eventually I might play with other people, and I assume that other instruments would be using the same system, maybe not, right?
Oh, so that's a very good statement right there. You assume that other people would be using the same system or not.
Yeah, because I
And-
assumed
yes.
that the Shakuhachi played with the Kodo, like, oh, they have some system for tuning, and I just kind of assumed, like, Western style, we tune to this, and maybe it's that. I don't know.
No, those are all very legitimate questions, and those are things I have to ask myself. What system are they using that they need their flute to play with? What approach? So I started to question, like, I need to understand the different systems over the years. So let's identify there's systems involved, and whether you agree with those systems or not, and whether you are indoctrinated into those systems or not. Anybody else? Barry.
So my goal would be a perfectly in tune A440 flute. But that being said, older flutes don't do that and have other qualities that I'm learning to appreciate, partly thanks to you. Because you said, you sure you want me to adjust the A on this
Right,
old Seshu?
Right.
No, maybe you're right, man. Leave it, don't
Well,
touch.
that's part of the things I encountered, right? So you're a musician, Barry? Like you need to play an A440 with other musicians that play at
No, I'm
A440?
just a hack.
Yeah, so my question is, you're agreeing to a system that you actually don't understand. Why A440, right? Because there are many instruments that don't, in the non-Western canon of instruments.
But then I'm in tune with my teacher.
Well, then that's a reason for you to do it. You could say that I play because I have to be in tune with my teacher, right? That it's not necessarily about A440, because your teacher could be off and on sometimes. Unless you're the kind of your teacher is a very strict kind of teacher.
I think relative pitch would probably be more important.
Okay.
I don't care what absolutely it is, but the notes are all related.
Right, right. And a lot of musicians have your understanding of it doesn't have to be A440, but we all have to agree on relatively what our fundamental is, right? Yeah, so that's another way of looking at something, that someone who's not quite indoctrinated, someone who is very indoctrinated, and someone who's aware of the systems, but flexible, right? Anybody else?
Well, I guess a little bit like this is, I'll play row for a while, and then I'll have, when I have a pitch meter, and then the row I'm playing, I'll turn the pitch meter to the 435 or something, whatever that matches my row, but then look at the relative pitches and having the Marys flatter than Western flat. Does that just make sense?
Yeah. So you're concerned with that relative tunings, right, to the
Yes.
flute. It doesn't have to be A440. You're
Right.
flexible to what the instrument should be, right? And that's a little closer to like a more holistic way of thinking about tuning, which is more like the just intonation system, which is different from the
Equal temperament?
what is it?
Is it equal temperament?
Equal temperament, right? That's 440 in Western scale, chromatic scale. Yeah, so you're flexible like Barry, right? But you understand that there is a system to reference. Yeah. Anybody else when they approach their instrument?
I'm not concerned about pitch. I'm playing hotoku and, by myself, and don't intend to play with other people, probably. But then it occurred to me that I should be probably concerned about playing correctly for the design of the flute. You know, and playing at the pitch that flute, you know, that a real player would get out of that flute. And so I find myself having to work, or feel like I'm working towards that, irrespective of what the pitch is in absolute terms.
Great, great. So your approach is just to get the sound you want out of the instrument, regardless of what the pitch is. What do you think that the instrument should be doing? Because, you know, I have two very different instruments here, and they do different things. They're meant to do different things, and not one's required to reach a pitch, and the other is not. So if you're playing this one, then you would think, what is that instrument made to do? You know, and if your teacher uses this, you can decide whether that is the right path for you, or you want to find a teacher that plays another kind of flute and is interested in another way of playing music. That's about getting the sound out of the flute rather than the actual A440 standard. Yeah. Anybody else? Lydia.
So for me, I feel like I'm trying to get a certain timbre out of it more than the pitch itself. That I want the sound quality to be sweeter and gentler. And sometimes I feel guilty about that because I feel like I should want to have this, you know, perfect pitch, but I don't know, I think it's much more of a spiritual practice than anything.
Okay. Yeah. So you're aware of trying to attain the standard in terms of what the practice is in contemporary, you know.
Like the right sound of the do is my idea, I guess.
Yeah, well, the idea of right is depending, again, upon the system you agree with, right? Because the older Honkyoku flutes, what's right for them is not A440, right? After I started investigating and talking to people and researching, so I learned that, people actually are against A440, right? So there's a whole other school of thought that I wasn't exposed to until I started investigating.
Personally, I think right sound is like your own personal
Mhm.
idea of
Yeah.
what's right, rather
Right.
than like any specific construct.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very legitimate. Before I get to that, anybody else want to share an experience, their experience of approach when they play the shakuhachi?
I always try and like to just carry on what Didier was saying when I pick up my flute and like my mission as a musician is to just like find creative expression that is true to what I'm doing. And so if I find something that's like really weird that it does, I'm like, great, I want to find all of the very strange kind of things that are a bit wrong that I can make melodic. And like my favorite player is Clive Bell from England. I don't know if you know.
London.
And he does all of these strange sounds that are so melodic and so gentle and like soft, and it's like finding, for me it's not so important about the like set tuning of it, but it's just like how can the relationship of all of the holes and the sounds that it can make, and it's just all of those relationships trying to mix them together really. So if the row is weird and wrong, it's like, okay, well, what should I do? So what else does it want to say, and like can I make it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so your intention when you pick up your flute is not to play with fixed other people that are playing in 440.
No, I just improvise. By myself in an acoustic space, ideally.
Yeah. And that's a totally legitimate approach, right?
Yeah.
A very individual approach.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So I just warm up with row and get it, and not really worry about where I am as far as 440 or not. I kind of know my flute is.
Right.
But then I have a beginning student that it's a little bit. I want her to get that row.
Not getting bad habits.
Yeah. So that makes a difference. And so she's on a meter, and then I have to go on a meter, to make sure that that's kind of matching. Because I don't want to tell her, no, that's wrong. It's you're flat. That's kind of wrong.
Yeah, so you agree with the A440, but you're flexible, and you're aware that newbies can't reach a D A440 because it takes technique and strength to finally make a strong row that's in tune. And so you want to encourage them and show them where the standard is, but let them, develop into it. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I had just a question about your saying that there are people who are anti-440.
Right.
By that, do you mean that there are people who are opposed to sort of mandating that every 1.8 has got to hit this pitch? Is that what you mean?
I would say that the people that are against it are against having to actually play your shakuhachi at A440. Having to do that every time you play your shakuhachi. There are teachers who say you have to play at A440 every time you play your flute, right? And that's legitimate. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I also think that there are a lot of people who are just against equal temperament in general. Like Bach wrote for just intonation instead of equal temperament, and so there's like a whole community of musicians who do not like to play in modern tuning, and it doesn't follow the natural patterns of nature as much.
So, forgive my ignorance, but when did
Bach?
our current tuning system get established?
During the Baroque period.
And then it was a different standard before 440 also. So it's kind of arbitrary, right? So that's part of the question of why are you tuning something that's arbitrary? Anybody else want to share with their approach when they pick up a flute? Does it matter A440? Okay, Seamus, you had another.
No, I was gonna say, I've kind of always been partial to the 432 because that's how I was raised, and I played different instruments and playing flute. I know you're a guitarist as well. So when you're playing, do you detune down to match your shakuhachis if you want to do duets or if you want to do any kinds of ensembles? Because anything that's a tunable instrument can usually be played with to get close enough to match whether shakuhachi is, depending on whether or not you went A440 or A432 or whatever. But she's right that Bach did that. And a lot of that was, at that particular time, was just as controversial as it is now. He still had the people who hated that. But if we can detune instruments to match shakuhachi, then the whole world opens up on ensembles. So I didn't know, I'm curious if because I know you play guitar, have you done that with yours?
I mean, I'm very flexible with the tuning. I just like, is it Francis. Like Francis, I try to get the sound I want out of the instrument that I'm playing at the moment. I'm less concerned with tuning unless we agree on what the tuning is at the moment and what we need to tune to. I have a lot of experience playing live on stage with a shakuhachi and a guitar. And what happens on stage lights is that the shakuhachi gets sharper and the guitars get flatter. And so that we always try to, like, right when we play the song, we have to quickly tune up or adjust to know, or tune, the guitar has to tune much sharper that by the time we play, they're going to be in tune. And so the important thing is to be in tune together as opposed to agree on a fixed pitch, whatever that is, whether it's 432 or 440, or when I was studying with Sogawa-san in 2002, we were making Ji-Ari Shakuhachi, we were tuning to 442, right? And that little bit of an edge makes your flute heard more above others, right? That's a secret. And I have a feeling some of those makers are tuning to 443 now. That was 20 years ago, right? That I was working with Sogawa-san.
Tune inflation.
Right? So it all comes down to, why am I retuning a flute for you, right? When the maker asks, like, what instrument are you playing? What music do you play? What do you need to do? And if you don't actually play the shakuhachi much, and you just collect flutes and you say, hey, I think this is out of tune, can you retune it? I usually will say no, because it's fine as it is. But if it's your instrument that you play often and you go, I think there's something wrong with this, then we can talk about what that is, and then we can adjust the tuning to what you need it to do, right? So, and I do that often. So when players send me a flute that says, I think there's something wrong with the sumeri, I automatically know that the player is not experienced. Because does anybody know what sumeri is? Anybody? Sumeri? Oh,
It's a flattened suit.
yeah, and if anybody else who plays the shakuhachi knows, su is the lowest hole on the shakuhachi, right? The air has to travel all this way to make that sound, right? It's harder to make a strong sound on su than it is on the e, the thumb hole, because it's so short, right? You can go, it's quite loud, but the su, I mean, this one's quite good, but oftentimes su is low. So a sumeri is a handicap note where you're quarter holding it or half holding it. So when they say I can't get a good su, it's because it's a dark note. That means you don't understand the music that's being played. And I would say, well, ask your teacher, does it need work, you know? So and then we have a conversation because I don't want to just do the adjustment if someone doesn't have an understanding of what needs to be done. And when they do say, I really needed to do this, you know, because I play this music and every time I come to that part in the score, I have to adjust. Then I know that there's a problem or there's an issue. Then I play the flute and I play. And it's like, and I could say, well, I can get it, you know, at the tone color that it was meant to get. And then it, you know, it's great when the player can visit me, then we can sit together and go, oh, see, you're not digging in with your embouchure, you know, to get, and then they go, oh, you know, so it's a matter of a learning curve. You know, I mean, we're all at different experience levels, right? To be able to like produce the note. And if you can't produce the note, you don't actually understand what it needs, and it's really the operator error. But sometimes it is an issue, right? So, any questions so far?
Just a
Alicia.
quick beginner one. So if we're doing Robuki together or we're playing Jimuje together, so we are supposed to sound, well, I've always, like, what I tried to do, because I'm a clarinetist, I'm like, oh, I need to lock into whatever we're all playing.
Right.
But that's relative tuning, right? And that's what, even though we all use different systems, we still try to listen to each other and lock onto some kind of agreed pitch in the moment.
There is a reference, and that's the leader of the group. What tune is that leader playing at, and what kind of flute it is, and then everybody has to match that. Yeah, it's not just
Or I guess for a huge
Yeah.
group, I guess we just try our best. But
You can try your best, but you know that the master is there playing that flute, and we need to match that. Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Fine, so listen to the nearest master and be like, okay.
Well, yeah, you have to identify the master. Like today, I don't know where you're at today's Robuki.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a master in the front, you know, like
Yeah.
we have to listen for them, not the person next to you, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why that's why in an orchestra, the first violinist usually stands up and gives you your basic note,
Yeah.
and then everybody's gonna go right off of that.
Right, right. Because everybody's tuning, all the violins and voice are going to be different, right? Because they're hearing just intonation than, you know, the equal temperament probably.
Yeah, but he tunes to the oboe
I was
though.
gonna say.
What was it? You said something interesting just now, like about. Okay, anyway, I lost my thought. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts before? Lydia?
And just, not related, but if your flute, if somebody, so I made a flute in, Lisbon, and I can make all of the notes in the first octave, and then in the second octave, I can't get all of them. That is, I assume, the maker's error, and not me as the player. How would you change that tuning? What would you do in order to make that more playable?
Did you say you made the flute?
Yeah, I was at a workshop.
Right, so you made the flute and you played the flute and you couldn't get the second octave.
I can get half of it, yeah,
Right, so it probably, and how long have you been playing?
a while.
A while. Like you're sure that it's the flute and not you
Yeah.
that can't get it. Yeah, so there are tricks to change that to make it better, and I'd have to look at the flute because each flute is different and
Right.
every piece of bamboo is different. And if we're talking about Ji Na Shi flutes, the natural bore flutes,
Yeah, it is.
90% of making a good Ji Na Shi flute is choosing the right piece of bamboo. If you don't choose the right piece of bamboo with the right diameter to length ratio, which is about 1 to 28 to 1 to 30, meaning 1 inch to 30 inches or 1 inch to 28 inches. If it's around that 1 inch round to 30 inches long, you get a good tube sound that when you put the holes in the right place, things work pretty good. Some people have a big hole and a short flute, and that's when the upper octave isn't going to work because the bore's too big to constrict the higher octave notes so that they would sound. Or opposite is that the flute is too long with a small, you would get a very stuffy otsu, the lower octave, because it's just a long tube. But the second octave notes are squeezed so quickly that they're actually easier in the top of the second octave. So when you have thin bore flutes, actually the top of the octave works better. When you have fat flutes, otsu works better, but usually not. But there are tricks to fix the notes that don't work, and that's what I call spot tuning. My method of spot tuning is to find the spot that you can help to fix particular notes. And that's a different, I can talk briefly about that in a bit, but so jinashi, to answer your question is, we'd have to look at the flute and go, okay, where is it? And it could be a finger hole issue. If you're not experienced in making jinashi, there are little tricks to make those second octave notes easier. Like, have you heard of undercutting? I'm gonna talk about jinashi for a second.
Yeah.
Are you referring to where, because John Neptune had a class
Yes.
where he talked about like drilling finger holes, and if they're not rounded, you could have problems because of the air going through.
Yes,
He was just saying a lot about the inside of the flute.
Yeah, there's turbulence. So basically, this is not it. Let's just say generally. Sorry, excuse my illustration techniques here. So the holes have chimneys. Oh wait, this is one extra. These are called chimneys, right? The wall and the line, the inner wall thickness is called the chimney of the hole. Many old flutes and new flutes are just straight in, and they give a certain tonal quality to it. Now, you can look at some flutes and you can see that some flutes are undercut, meaning it goes bigger as you go into the bore, right? And Lydia, do you still have that flute that you made that's difficult?
Yeah, it's not with me, but yeah.
Yeah. So if you get it playing, come to the first difficult note you have in the second octave. It might be the chi or ri,
Yeah.
right? Undercut, like with an X-Acto knife, if you can.
Okay.
Little by little, and see what that does. And you have to check to make sure the other notes aren't being affected in an adverse way. Like suddenly you can go, oh wait, now that note is not so great, right? Because you did something here.
Problems create more problems.
Yes. But if you fix a problem, it fixes the whole flute.
Yeah.
In some ways, right? It's really interesting. You can go, oh, I've been having problems with this chi. The flute's fine. And then when you adjust the chi, suddenly the whole flute is better. It's kind of amazing because it just like becomes aligned. So undercutting is one way to bring in an easier second octave. Like you don't have to do all the holes. You just want to do the problematic one at first.
It also raises and lowers the pitch, right?
Not necessarily. Not when you undercut.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the front of the hole is still where the location, right?
Yeah.
That's the front. It's still there, but the inside got bigger.
Yeah, and if you do want to raise the pitch, you can make the holes bigger, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me get to that in a second. So with G Na Shi, and especially if the bore's not is slightly big up there, my method of spot tuning, which I don't know if I can get into right now, is basically I drop a bead into right behind. For example, if you're having trouble with the chi right here, it's too big, I would drop my little bead of a 5mm bead on a string, and I would tape it right to the chin rest right here. And then this constricts the air coming in here. And then what I talked about earlier was that when the bore is too big, it doesn't constrict the second octave note enough to squeeze that note out. You're constricting it right there, and it might squeeze that note out.
Okay.
Wow.
Right? And it might, affect the other notes, some notes in an adverse way, maybe not. Maybe it makes the whole flute better. And those are things you have to approach, like I said earlier about my repairs, minimally, slowly, very small, one step at a time, so that you just notice the change. You know, I didn't bring a bead, but unfortunately I should have brought a bead. This is a Jinashi flute that's big. So I'm just gonna play neutrally. So neutrally, Ro is a little weak. I have to dial it in. Neutrally, the thumb hole in the second octave was a little weak. I don't know if any of you were able to hear that. There's different tonalities in there. It's not balanced, like every note is not balanced like in the GRE flute, like this for example, playing neutrally. You tell me what was the difference in two of these flutes.
Could you play the Jinashi one more time?
The Jinashi, yes.
I mean, that was lower.
It's fuzzier, it's the.
Yeah.
Fuzzier?
Fuzzy.
Generally fuzzier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Low in tone, the other one's much bassier.
This one's bass.
Much
G
more-
Adi is bassier,
Raised and more resonant.
more resonant.
Yeah.
Something about it, I want to say like a bit, has more of like an acidic sound to it.
This?
I don't know why. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
It's
monk.
sharp.
It's a
Yeah.
monk out there like being spiritual, looking
Yeah.
internal.
Yeah.
It's internal, right? And this one is made to be external, to play to an audience. This one is meant to play, and so in some kinds of circles, they have names for this. Sotobuki. Buki, anyone knows what buki means?
Breath.
Breath.
Yeah.
Sotobuki is inside breath. Uchibuki is outside breath, right? So they call that these flutes, oh, that's outside breath, and you play it with a sotobuki or uchibuki. Not everybody is aware of those terms or even aware of that way of seeing your sound or experiencing your sound. So it, you know, again, it goes back to like, what music are you playing? What sound are you after? Are you imitating your teachers? Are you imitating something you hear you want to play like John Neptune, which is fabulous too. So it just depends on what you're doing with what flute, and you know, you want to get the appropriate flute, and then when you have the appropriate flute, is it in tune, right? That's where we're at now. When you have the appropriate flute to play Honkyoku solo by the monks with just the wind, where no meter matters, no pitch matters, just tonality and phrasing matters, your understanding of dynamic phrasing with your breath, or do you need to play with the piano, you know? Like last night, John Neptune, do you need to play with a bass and a guitar, acoustic guitar, 12-bar blues? All that matters, you know, depending on your instrument. So if you were to play sotobuki, right? So you're to play that way by yourself in a room. Does A440 matter? Or does the internal sound of breath in the bamboo matter? And what is your intention? And if someone says the sumiri isn't working, I would go, okay, works fine for me, you know? But, so like, how are you blowing that sumeri, right? With the inside breath or outside breath? So, I rarely do any tuning until someone says, I know there's an issue, that doesn't work when I do this. And then I play it and go, oh, he's right, or she's right. It's very sticky. And in that situation, even on GRE, let me see.
So I have a beginner question. Is that an external, like, do we call it an external breath flute because the bell or end part of it is actually going outward? Does that affect?
That's not about the bell.
Ironically, as a Western, traditional
Yeah.
music player, my wood shakuhachi that I got from Marco Leonard for $200 ends up like the one that you were just playing. It had like that.
It's straight.
Not the bamboo. bar
Yeah,
bell.
it's just kind of straight, right? But this is
Yeah.
bamboo too, it's straight,
Well,
right?
yeah.
It's the bukiest breath, so it's outside breath or inside breath. And when it's inside breath, it means you're playing with awareness to the tube of the bamboo. That's what you're doing.
Oh,
You're
that's
not.
just what you're doing personally. It actually doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. The
Okay.
visuals don't matter. It's
okay.
called the breath style. Basically, are you playing inside breath or outside breath? Having said that, if something is stuffy and it's not getting the tone color they want, then you can actually let me pass. So let me see. It's look at this over. I'll just pass it around. Look at the finger holes. Look at the Sue finger holes. It's very minimally undercut. Very minimally undercut. So that maker kind of knew what they were doing. Like
How old is that flute?
it's somebody came up. I thought it was about 100 years old, and Hideo next to me said it's probably older than 100 years. Just look at the finger hole in the bottom, that sumeri I was just talking about. It's not undercut at the top, but at the bottom, it's a little undercut. I don't know if you see that. Has a little bit of the bottom su comes down a little bit, but not the top. I mean, if you don't study this stuff and talk to a lot of makers and players and very experienced teachers, you kind of don't know, like this knowledge, right? I've been doing it for 30 years, and even very incredible virtuosic players don't know, like how they're playing or whether they should play internally or externally. They just do what they do, right? If you're agreeing to A440 contemporary way, and you need to kind of like, do drills and scales and all that, you're not really thinking about internal playing. So and that's fine. You don't need to know it because you're on a different path. So it depends on, as a maker in America who has repaired, I think, over 1,000 flutes easily, tuned over 1,000 flutes. I start to question, like, why am I doing this for people, And I'm destroying an artifact that people can actually go directly to the flute and learn about another life, another culture, and how they lived and played 100 years ago. Yeah. Did I have a question?
I was mainly a bit confused. Hasn't it got loads of urushi inside? Isn't it?
There is somewhat new urushi, probably within the last year. I actually rebuilt the top, so you probably don't want to play it. But the idea is just to look at the bottom hole and see if the person who fabricated that kind of knew something.
Yeah.
Right?
I have a question for you, Perry.
Yep.
My first flute I got from you back in 2010 was one of your Earth models.
Mm-hmm.
Now those are Janashi, I said.
Yeah, the natural born.
It's like that monk flute. It's sweet, but it's inside voice, and it's perfect for taking with you and just meditating with.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get up into the other models and like this, and it's spacey and it's room. But I recommend those Earth models if anybody hasn't tried them. They're amazing. You're still doing those, right?
I still do those. I make my flutes only on commission because I'm so busy with other stuff. But my service to the Shakuhachi community is repairs because everybody needs a repair. Right? You can find a new flute anywhere, but it's hard to get a repair. But okay, let's pass this one around. There's a very slight undercutting on this one too, which is actually some new flutes don't have undercutting. You know, so that's an interesting thing to be aware of, depending on your where you are on your path. Is like to look at the instrument and what it's made for, and some new flutes don't need the undercutting because the bores are so precise. It's like a silver bore.
Is it thin? A thin board, wouldn't the thicker board be more in need of undercutting? 'Cause the
Generally,
chimney- the higher chimney
yes,
height.
yes. Unless that school made thick bore flutes because they like that stuffy sound, which is quite legitimate and real.
Cause that's kind of the interface, right, between
Right.
the inner bore and the outer air.
Right.
is
The chimney. The depth of the chimney definitely affects the tone color and the quality of sound. Very thin-walled flutes have a bright sound, like the Chinese thin-walled flutes, the dizi and the xiao. They're thin-walled, and the chimney is very thin compared to shakuhachi, so they're brighter. They're brighter sounds. Shakuhachi generally is a denser, stuffier sound when compared to those flutes with thin walls. So yeah, on contemporary instruments, oftentimes there's no undercutting. But on old instruments, oftentimes there is undercutting, you know, and it makes me wonder how those old monks, those old players, discovered that it needed that, right? It's just a process that they shared amongst each other, because shakuhachi, if you all know the history, was only made by monks for each other to play solo. It didn't really matter, the tuning at all. I went to Meianji. Has anyone ever heard of Meianji? Charles, what's Meianji?
It was the sort of mothership. It was not the oldest Fuge temple. It was the second oldest, but made by not the guy who brought it over from.
Kurosawa Kinko, or
No. It was much before Kinko. It was
Guy from Fuke.
Fuke?
The guy.
the guy. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name.
That's all right.
Who brought mythologically the
Yeah, I know who you mean. That brought Zen from China to Japan. Yes. I forgot his name too. But anyway, Meianji is the temple of Komuso Temple in Kyoto, right? It's the main temple that is established to represent Honkyoku, the most established Zen music. When I went to their annual gathering in 2002, and they opened with Choshi, right, the original piece, you had every length of flute in this huge temple. Like you had 50 people in the temple with natural jinashi flutes, all jinashi, all old flutes, different lengths, all playing together. I don't know, you all know the music, Sure Uri, all cacophony, because of all the different tunings. It didn't matter to them. Pitch, they were nowhere near the same pitch, and nobody was concerned about playing in tune with anybody, because it was about blowing peace, blowing the note and the chant. So that told me a lot. That told me a lot about like the beginning, the early, most established Shakuhachi school, and what they think is important, and where it is now. You know, and when I address pitch, I have to go to that, the most, you know, from one end of the spectrum to the other.
But isn't that a modern reinvention, the temple?
It's a contemporary representation of the past, of what they know of the past.
Can we really know that what they're doing represents what was going on?
I mean, I can't say that we know anything, really, you know, like.
I wish we could. I mean, I wish we knew, but I don't know that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think people write about, you know, a lot of the history of Komuso Shakuhachi is fabricated, you know, because somebody had to write it down. And we don't really know what happened, but we know certain things happened. And that's why it's so important for me to not retune flutes, because I don't want to be part of that, you know, rewriting of a book that didn't need to, like, that's already, this is the teacher, right? Sorry. This is the teacher, right? not the guy that's got a telephone call from another guy telling me how to play this flute. So when I get this flute, after I, you know, for someone like for me who's been playing a lot of music and different things, I start to go, okay, does it feel, maybe like where Francis's approach is, does it feel good? Do all the holes connect with each other? Can I express myself with the flute? You know, and that's only like, that should only be a question that you know that you're gonna take years to answer, right? Because you don't know how to play the flute yet. And even like when these flutes that I think I know well, if it were my only flute stuck on an island, I would get to know it much, much better, right? Because every day you pick it up, you know, you learn so much more. Right, right. So going back to Meianji, it's like those monks didn't matter. And then if you were to play this Honkyoku music, A440 is definitely not the way you want to go, right? So now somebody who's going to study with Riley Lee or John Neptune, you know, Riley Lee is very much a stickler on pitch. You need to hit that D, you need to hit that Daido, Meri, and C, extremely difficult. You need to hit that A flat. And that's all. That's a big difference of your fingers, right? That's all the same hole. There's 4 notes in there, microtones, you know? So is it the hole that's out of tune? Or is it the player, right?
Like I feel like Riley would still be happy to teach someone in his own way, where if they had a slightly different flute or something and he understood that that was the voice of the flute. Because like I think any teacher would be like, oh no, a bit lower, or like the Daido Meli, like is they might not say like C or something, but they might still be like, bring it down more and stuff, instead of, because it's like all teachers, I feel like in the sense would be trying to communicate the same thing.
I don't know, some of them are pretty.
Maybe some.
You got something to share, Barry? You got something to share?
I'm not naming any names.
Yeah.
You gotta get down to C.
You know, and you know, yeah. I mean, I agree with
yeah.
you, Francis. I agree with you. A lot of teachers are very open and they're very supportive of where the student is and very understanding of, oh, you just need to like relax in that note and then finally it'll come, right? As long as you hear it and you know it'll come. And the opposite is.
Yeah, or at least to know that that's the target, that you've got to get there eventually, soon.
Yeah. And we might have had some teachers that are pretty strict, you know, right? And those teachers that are pretty strict can actually kind of like take the fun out of it, you know? And so.
Right. Maybe there's a middle way.
It should be a middle way, right? There should be a middle way. So I guess going back to tuning, like what time? Oh, you know what? I should wrap it up in like 10 minutes. I guess my final, before I have any questions, no, actually, why don't we just ask, if you have any questions right now on anything, feel free to.
What if Rho is flat, and it really is flat? What does that mean? They made the flute a little too long?
It could be. It could be. So if you're comparing with A440 and you have a solid technique, and you know that you're going, you know, is that flat? You know, you go. There's about a 5 cents difference in there that I could barely hear, right? But I could barely hear that 5 cents difference. But if you hear it, you know, I'm meditating to get there, and it sounds flat, and you're going, and it's getting that really flat note loud, then it definitely is flat. And I would say it's probably the fault of the flute, you know, and there are things that we could do, like cut a bit of it. If it's just the bottom row, you could shave 6 millimeters off and you sharpen it, you know, like by 10 cents. And that shouldn't affect any other notes. Could be that right in the middle of the bore, it's a little too small, so it's constricting that row note and squeezing it so it's sharper. You stand a little bit here and you widen that bore it'll lessen the sound wave and it'll be flatter. And so to approach it, you need to decide what is the least invasive way to work on the flute. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. And is there a tolerance, like 5 cents, 10 cents, as you go up and down a scale and you look at the meter and you see it vary a little bit? Is there a tolerance
Yes.
that you shoot for?
I mean, you shoot for a 440, or if you're studying with your teacher, you shoot for your teacher's sound.
But I know you as the tuner. And
Me
you
as a
say
tuner.
This flute is in tune. It's within 5 cents each note, maybe up a little down. You can adjust for. And
Right.
maybe if it's 25 cents, you go, oh, it's a little bit a lot. It's a lot
Right,
too
right.
aggressive."
Who was it? Somebody said there is no perfectly tuned shakuhachi because everybody plays differently, right? So a flute can be slightly flat for a softer player who likes a very sweet sound, and sharp for a very strong player who likes to honk. So it's not the fault of the flute. I mean, I would play it in different situations, play music with it, and see how it feels with music, because you have a lot of flexibility when you're playing music. When you're going. You have a lot of flexibility to bend the pitch to where you want it to be. But if you're going like this to your tuner, gee, it's out of tune. You know what I mean? Then it's like, it's not the tuner's fault or the flute, it's how you're playing the flute to the tuner. And whoever it was that says you should play to your tuner a little bit to adjust, that's only to tell you how much you need to grow. One should not always play, and that comes from Riley Lee, one should not always play with the tuner. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, having said that, there is an old flute, right? Like this one, where the E. This is a Jinashi flute. You could hear kan no ro, all holes closed. I'm going to open the thumb hole, which should be the same notes flat. Quite flat, but I can kari to it. So do I need to enlarge that hole, change what some secret might be in there for the original maker to make it play in tune for me? Or do I adjust to the flute until maybe either I feel like, you know what, it's not even ever an issue because I've adjusted to it. Or it's bothering me because I can't play this lullaby. So that's a decision I make on my own for flutes. But if somebody who knows their flute very well say, it always bothers me when I do this, and I'll say, oh, I see what you mean, I can make the adjustment. Yeah? So basically my whole talk is about, I need to talk to the individual, see what you're doing, what kind of flute are you playing, what kind of music are you playing, what is your approach, how do you breathe, does it really matter, can you adjust your ears and playing to this artifact, the teacher, or do you need to make the teacher do something that you needed to do, and then destroy this thing that's a record of what somebody made 100 years ago, 200 years ago. That's basically the gist of my talk. Any questions? Paul?
I'm fascinated about the technique, your technique with the tuning beads.
Okay.
I know you don't have time to get into it now. Have you published or put anything on your website about that process?
I have
Or is that
not.
like a trade secret?
It's not a trade secret. I'm happy to share, and I teach it to students or people who come, and I show them how to do it. But if you write about it, and people out there who don't actually know how to play start applying it, they actually are not going to get the results they want to get. It's like saying if you mix, red with blue, you get purple, right? And then everyone's like, I didn't get the purple. Well, it's like, well, how much red did you mix with how much blue, So it's kind of like that. You have to see it and understand it over a while, time, yeah.
Where did you go off of that? Is that like John Neptune had a like a workshop yesterday, basically physics, where it's like if you make a slight change to the inside of the flute, it will change the sound, and they're different. If you
Mhm.
put that in different places, you
Right.
will change different things. And
Right.
just you experiment with it.
Pressure points. He called them, right? Did he call them pressure
I
points?
think so.
Yeah. So all along the flute, I mean, I don't know if you don't have to stay for this at all. I mean, my lecture is done. Right in the middle is the row, right? And so and then from here to here, in the middle is the rokan, the second rokan. And in between the quarter points also affects all of that. So the first thing you want to check is the middle of the point between the note that you want to adjust. So for Su right here, the middle is going to be right around here. And then you're going to find this point, whether you drop a beat here. If you drop a beat here and the note is a lot worse, you can drop a tiny piece of wet newspaper and push it in with a chopstick, so it's like, so it's less. And if it's still worse, you know it has to be enlarged, right? Or then the second thing is you bring a piece of paper to the quarter point of Su to Su, the half is here. The quarter point is here. You could try the bead and paper again. You might find that a piece of paper suddenly did wonders. So you shrank that part, and in shrinking this part, you enlarge this part. You know, just the idea of the physics of it. So you did the opposite in another spot, and you attained what you wanted to do in that middle spot.
If that fixes it, you go in and you paint a little bit of goo or whatever in there.
Yes.
You make it a concentric ring or just a spot?
I think a concentric ring, the idea of it is nice, but I think just a spot in there will do it, as long as the spot is smooth and glossy.
Right.
Right. So I mean, so that's the idea of the tuning beads and my spot tuning. The theory is easier to understand than the practice, because you need the playing skills, which is the biggest tool in any maker's toolbox, the playing skill. Without the skill at a high level, you can't do any of this. You can't tune.
Make a lot of mistakes as well.
You make a lot of mistakes.
Well,
Yeah. If you can't understand sotobuki, uchibuki, you can't tune. You can't do any of the tuning, right? And so when a lot of, again, beginners can barely make the sound, and they'll say something's out of tune, and it's like, because they're not producing the sound, I mean, obviously you all know that beginners will be like, something's wrong with the roll, right?
It's a classic. This flute's broken.
There's something wrong with this flute,
It's always the flute.
right? And then one day it's, and they're like, whoa, right? And then and then it's like, wait, where'd it go?
Yeah.
And then, but finally, when I tell people long tones, when you get the note, make a long tone. That's your rudimentary technique, a long tone, right? And then with that long tone, you handle this easy stuff, the fingering. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you.